So with the Four Knights of the Apocalypse manga currently at the beginning of its time skip and us yet to be reintroduced to our main title cast and how far they've grown and gotten stronger over the course of this time skip. And the potential growth of our main cast is honestly incredibly exciting, and I cannot wait to see how they've grown over the course of these past couple of years. But that is not what this video is about. As you can probably tell from the title and thumbnail, I am going to be ranking and explaining all four Knights of the Apocalypse. Now, when I first announced that this was a possibility for a video, obviously the one thing that was being told was like, we already kind of know the rankings of the four Knights, why even bother making it? 1, because I want to. 2, since we're in a time skip, I think it would be a good idea to just make a video detailing their current strengths and abilities and where they rank power-wise before getting reintroduced into the cast post-time skip, as they will most likely be immensely more powerful than they were before the time skip. So I think it would be a nice idea just to set a baseline and go back to it in order to compare the current versions with the previous versions of our characters, just to see how far they've grown. And also as a way to just put the basic information for each character in one singular video, so it's easy for people to come back and double check on things. Plus, I've always wanted to do a type of ranking / explaining video, and I figured it'd be kind of fun. But before we get into this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps and shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and keeps me motivated to make more videos like this for you guys. Now with all that out of the way, let's get right into this ranking. So obviously, for the first character at the bottom of the rankings is going to have to be our MC, Percival. Now despite the growth he went through in the Demon Realm arc before the time skip, where his hope powers manifested a literal stand that was able to give him advice and talk to him, even fight for him to an extent, and help boost his overall physical stats, speed, and reaction time, it is still not enough to put him above the other characters on this list, as despite him being the MC, he was obviously the least experienced and the weakest in terms of actual combat and utilization of his own abilities in comparison to everyone else in the Four Knights. And that was very evident throughout the earlier sections of the story. Now that isn't to say that Percival is weak. He's still physically one of the strongest characters in the series, at least barring the Sins and other characters. But to the average person, he is immensely strong. He was even able to bitch slap a giant wolf and KO it in an instant. Percival can hold his own against the average human being in the universe. However, that isn't to say that he wouldn't get amped by his own magic power, which is hope. And as the name suggests, he is the literal embodiment of hope. Whenever people close to him or others around have hope towards him, it will boost his power, giving him a huge boost to his overall speed, strength, durability, and output for his own magical power. Heck, this power even allows him to be revived from the dead. As to count in the series, Percival has died 3 separate times, and due to the power of hope, was shortly fully revived and completely healed. Now, this doesn't mean to say that this power is all-powerful and that it'll instantly win his fights against most people. On the contrary, due to Percival's lack of battle experience and just overall technique, for the longest time throughout the series, Percival had overly relied on his magical power, which honestly stunted his growth and potential, as his hope magic is essentially classified as hero type, giving him the utilization to use it in a variety of different ways, like multiple different magical attributes and abilities. He's able to conjure things, he's able to enchant his weapons, he's able to heal himself and others. He's able to fly and enhance his own physical strength, speed, and durability. He can even manifest his aura into a variety of different things, like energy weapons, like a giant sword for his hand, or even create a giant golem head to just take the brunt of attacks or encase himself and his allies in order to be protected from a massive blow or fall. Common use of his ability was actually creating a bunch of mini Percival golems. At first, relatively simple-minded, would only go for one particular goal that Percival had in mind when they were created, and eventually slowly evolving, gaining more and more personality as Percival himself and his magical power got stronger, alongside with others having faith in Percival. This came to head in the Demon Realm arc when during his training, the entire Demon Realm had faith in Percival, and it boosted his power to such an extreme that it was able to manifest an entirely new golem that was fully self-aware, had information, was able to have a full conversation and even strategize, to the point where it could give Percival advice in battle, and even slightly possess him to give him a boost in his own physical strength and reaction times, which was much needed as it helped accelerate Percival's own growth in terms of combat, as he learned during his training. Now, as it currently stands in the story, Percival has gained an insane amount of swordsmanship skill. As he trained with Lancelot, he was able to slowly but surely gain more experience in using his sword. But thanks to his hope powers and the golem that was manifested, it boosted his strength and reaction time to the point where he was able to learn a lot quicker, and he was able to advance his training a lot faster than anticipated. And his growth was shown specifically in his fight against Mortlich towards the end of the Demon Realm arc, where Mortlich was fast enough to create a multitude of after images and slice Percival a variety of times in seemingly an instant. But as it was shown, Percival was also able to instantly identify and parry every single one of Mortlich's strikes without even getting a single scratch on him with that incredibly fast move, showcasing that outside of his swordsmanship, Percival's speed was also on par, if not greater, than someone who is stated to be the strongest and best swordsman in the Chaos Knights. Barring Nanashi. But what's crazy about that is that is actually base Percival. He had no access to his magical power, meaning the jolt that he got during his training and the actual training itself put him on par with seasoned knights, if not surpassing many of them, in only a week, which is insane growth, and that is primarily due to the fact that he was being taught by Lancelot, and also that his hope powers gave him the essential boost he needed to properly learn and grow in this one instance. Combine this newfound swordsmanship with his variety of different abilities, with his hope magic, with the enchantments, the mini Percival golems that can do multiple things, including exploding, healing, and even protection in flight, Percival is a force to be reckoned with. Now, there is an antithesis to his abilities, and that is essentially the mummification power that he used in the Leonis arc when he seemingly fell into a rage and despair when he thought his friends were dead. This was only used once, but once he came in contact with someone, he essentially mummified them. He mummified Shion's arm, thus making it seemingly dead, had the life drained from it, thus making a whole new side of Percival even more dangerous. It's still unknown essentially what this power specifically is, but if used correctly, it could basically be an instant kill with a single touch, which is terrifying to think about. But this is only accessed when Percival essentially falls into despair, and it's only been used once, and we don't really know what fully triggers it, and if Percival would be able to control it at the end of the day. So it's kind of a non-factor in his ranking, as it is very sporadic in terms of its activation. It has only been used once, making it relatively hard to scale. But the potential is still very much there. Not to mention Percival is basically immortal. But despite all of these abilities, he is still the weakest Knight of the Apocalypse at this moment. Granted, the rest, aside from the obvious number one, are still a lot closer now thanks to Percival's training and better mastery over his magical abilities. So let's move on. Now, this next one, in terms of the third and second strongest, is kind of hard to scale due to primarily one thing that will put one character above other is hearsay and their own personal admissions of certain things, as there was never any real way to properly compare their feats, as based on on-screen appearance, one does seems to do a bit more than the other, but if we take another's word by it, then they are slightly stronger, if not on par with the other Knight of the Apocalypse. So, for the moment, since this is still a toss-up, I'm going to put a number 3, and this is kind of hard for me to say, I'm going to put Tristan at number 3. Yes, the child of the previous protagonist, a child of the strongest demon and goddess, is the third strongest out of the 4 knights. Now, here's my explanation as to why, putting together what I know. So first off, Tristan essentially is relatively strong. He's already superhumanly strong, fast, and capable. He is an incredibly skilled swordsman and is able to dual wield. And what makes it even more impressive is the fact that he has very good use of his goddess powers, with a variety amount of arc-based attacks, star-based moves which give him a lot of range attacks, and is able to enchant his own swords with the arc's light in order to cut through things very easily. He is also able to heal himself. He's got the power of flight from both his demon and goddess sides, but healing himself obviously is going to be a huge plus. But aside from that, even though his goddess powers are relatively strong, he is a lot stronger when he uses his demon powers, especially his demon mark mode. And we've seen his demon mark mode essentially twice. Once in a brief glimpse against Melascula, the Chaos Melascula, where he was able to essentially one-shot her in her snake form, which is her strongest form, seemingly effortlessly. Previously when he was just using his goddess powers, he wasn't really doing much against her, as she kept basically holding him at bay, not really taking an advantage in the fight, but he wasn't doing too much with just his goddess powers. He didn't win that fight until he used his demon mark, and that was instantaneous and very quick. But in the battle against Meligaland, the combined version of Chaos Melascula and Chaos Galland, Tristan went into his demon mark mode and instantly ripped that thing apart. Dominated the fight, no real showcase of effort. Ripped off the side of its face, burst a hole through it, and even ripped off another head. Killing it with no effort whatsoever, and its sheer aura was able to just push away any oncoming attacks. Tristan in his demon mark mode is incredibly powerful and incredibly ruthless, which is the detriment, because the longer Tristan is in that form, it is harder for him to control, and he slowly loses himself, becoming more enraged and just hard focused on the fight, to the point where this power would actually start to hurt him, and it'll take somebody else to essentially knock him out. The only persons he can actually trust right now is Lancelot, obviously, and his father Meliodas, to essentially knock him out of this state. And the fact that his demon mark form is so unpredictable and not fully controllable, that kind of detriments him a bit, because if you fight a bit smarter against his demon mark form, you could take him out relatively easily if you just slightly overpower him or have him use it too much, to the point where it'll be a huge physical and mental drain on him. But that's just either or of his abilities. Tristan a few times has utilized his goddess and demon powers at the exact same time, essentially tempering his demon powers with his goddess powers. This weakens both due to the fact that they're both natural opposites. But due to this, he's able to utilize both the power of the goddess clan and the arc, along with the purgatory flames of his demon side, and utilize a lot more of their abilities. But in recent events in the manga with the Demon Realm arc, Tristan was able to essentially unlock a brand new utilization of his powers called Annihilation, which he engulfs an area with dark snow and uses his shooting star attack to hit the dark snow, causing a chain reaction, essentially erasing the space where this area is, as they're both entirely opposite energies. Once they clash, they essentially erase whatever is there, breaking through any magical barrier, which allowed Tristan to take out a monster that was giving him so much trouble with little to no ease. It's literally just a bunch of miniature hollow purples, if you know Jujutsu Kaisen and Gojo's hollow purple. Now that power alone that Tristan has unlocked is incredibly powerful, and that more than makes up for the fact that these forms used in tandem kind of weaken each other to an extent. Tristan at base is still relatively physically strong and fast, and is still capable of flight regardless. But another thing that helps boost his rankings is his swordsmanship. He's a dual wielder and he uses two really cool swords. What makes them really cool, I don't know why I'm saying cool, they're very useful, and that is the fact that these two swords, Mael and Estarossa, are magically enchanted. The Mael sword gives him a resistance to mental attacks, so if someone tries to use a magical ability to affect his mind, as long as he's holding that sword, it gives him a mental resistance to these abilities, thus keeping him immune from anything that could potentially put him to sleep or do mental damage to him or even mind control him. As to how the Goddess Clan essentially has mind manipulation abilities and brainwashing, but they could essentially make other people immune to that as well. But the Estarossa sword is also incredibly useful, due to the fact that with this power, seemingly embodying the power of destruction and darkness, it's able to allow Tristan to cut through magical defenses. So if someone uses magical enhanced armor or a magical force field, this sword will allow Tristan to cut right through it, thus allowing him, if he boosts it with his, let's say, goddess or demon powers, cut through a lot of powerful defenses fairly easily. Granted, despite this being the case, we have never really seen Tristan use this utilization of his sword in tandem with his powers before, so for all we know, it could depend on the strength of the spell and the caster. So take that with a bit of a grain of salt. This is basically what I'm getting on from the additional information that we've gotten from volume 14 of the manga's physical volume release. Now, with all this in mind, with his base goddess form, his demon mark form, which is incredibly powerful and more suited to aim and allowing him to use a vast majority of his main power, to his mixed form that allows him to use both powers at the same time, but gradually awakens them, yet allows him to use probably his most destructive and overpowered attack yet, with his swordsmanship skills and the enchanted blades. Why am I putting him at number 3? And that's really the problem, like I stated earlier, because honestly, I was planning on putting Tristan at number 2 on this list, due to everything I just mentioned. However, on number 2, the main reason I'm putting this here is due to hearsay, and it might potentially be true, based on the implications of this character, and they also just have way more hacks than Tristan, and that is Gawain. And look, I'm not saying this because I'm biased towards Gawain, that she's my second favorite character in this group. Obviously, I'm not counting that, but her hacks and the potential that was stated previously in the story does make it highly possible that she is at least slightly stronger than Tristan, and I'm going to get into that in a second. Now, Gawain has 2 base forms. One is her standard form, where she is just a relatively short girl, and she primarily focuses on casting magical spells. And there's also her buff form, where as she stores magical power, basically lets her get taller and bulk up, giving him immense physical speed and strength, allowing her to basically be a full-on tank with the strength to back it up. And since I mentioned these 2 different utilizations, let's go by them one at a time. And let's just start with the form that we were introduced to Gawain with, and that is her buff form. Now, when she was introduced in this buff form, she was presented as seemingly unstoppable, immense power, but no real skill and experience, which is how Pelgard, somebody who is one of Arthur's strongest, was able to deal with her fairly easily without even really utilizing all of his strength, as he didn't even go there to fight the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse. In fact, he was running away. Yet he managed to deal with Gawain fairly easily because she was just letting her power throw her around. But that's something after the, defeat that she suffered, shattering her ego to an extent, started to learn to fix. When Chaos Gallant attacked Leonis, she fought him, and she was even compared to Escanor based off of the scent of his magical power that Gallant managed to sense. Now, that immediately would put Gawain in the potential to make it up there with Escanor. At least right now, I don't see her being at the level of Escanor. That is still a far cry. Maybe post-time skip, she'll probably be around his level, maybe, but not in the one state, obviously. Maybe base Escanor, middle of the road Escanor at max, but we'll see how that happens post-time skip. But with that admission alone, gives us the idea that she is physically incredibly powerful, and at least on the level of the commandments. She was even able to take multiple blows from Chaos Gallant at the same time, without too many scratches or even slowing her down. Yes, she did get actual damage, but it didn't really slow her down. She just kind of powered through it, and even surprised Gallant himself. Eventually, due to him having relatively thick skin, she began to think more on the fly, and used her variety of different hacks to win, primarily her teleportation ability, which she used to teleport her sword into Gallant's abdomen, and then she teleports herself up, grabs the sword, and then just slices him from the inside out, bisecting him, dealing a lethal blow. Obviously, Gallant regenerates, and Percival finishes it off, but it's highly possible that she was going to be able to win that fight if she continued to fight smarter. And as the story progressed, we see her, especially in the Demon Realm arc, fight a lot smarter, not just go headstrong and fight with no real plan of action. Now, her buff form is really only being able to get accessed if she actually builds up magical power beforehand. And since we saw her in her buff form in her introduction, that means she was most likely around full power. And she used some of that in order to use Absolute Cancel, teleportation a couple of times, and even to fight Gallant for a brief period of time. Being in that form does drain her. As we saw in the Demon Realm arc, about half of her power was saved up in order for her to go buff. And it wasn't even a long fight. She utilized a couple of her attacks at full power and teleportation a number of times in the fight against the Testament Beast alongside Tristan. And in that fight, she ended up towards the end basically using up a good chunk of her magical power, falling out of her buff form. And in the Melagallon fight, she used one big burst of her sun power in order to deal some damage to Melagallon, but that didn't really do all too much. She then collapsed from exhaustion. Now that alone could end up going against her being at number 2. However, you have to take into account that she was in her buff form presumably all day, and she had been continuously using teleportation and then absolute cancel, as well as multiple sun-based attacks, and was throwing hands with Chaos Galland for a good chunk of the fights during that arc, thus thoroughly exhausting herself as she did one big blast in order to damage Melagallon. That was after trying to fight it baseline as she was, so she used a lot of power and energy in those subsequent back-to-back fights and instances in that arc. So the fact that half of her power against Testament Beast was basically used to speed blitz for Chaos Knights, deal a couple of blows to Testament Beast, and multitude of teleportations, drained her incredibly quickly, makes a lot of sense when you really think about it, showcasing that she has a ton of magical power, especially if she saves it up, and a ton of actual attack power when she uses it correctly. And as we saw in that Demon Realm arc, she's able to utilize her spellcasting abilities with relative to no effort, except for the main drawback of her needing an incantation, though that could end up changing during the time skip, but for now that is a detriment to her. But that's the thing, even with her buff form she is relatively strong, but that's not taking into account her meticulous amount of hacks, which we see mainly in her regular base form, as I presume not being in buff form allows her to utilize all these spells relatively quickly and without much drain on her magical power, which is how she's been able to utilize her spellcasting very frequently without draining herself too much. But let's briefly go over some of the stuff that we know that she's able to do, as well as some other abilities that she showcased. We obviously know her teleportation ability and absolute cancel. She's also capable of flight, and she knows how to use an attack that slows down time. Thus, once she taps somebody, she is instantly able to slow them down to a crawl like she did with the 4 Chaos Knights that she faced in the Demon Realm arc without real effort whatsoever. And the only reason she even lost that fight was because she let her emotions get the best of her and she was knocked out instantly, which also showcases that her inner base form is more of a glass cannon, being able to cast a variety of spells, but since she can get knocked out fairly easily, it showcases that she's not as durable unless she's in her buff form. And when she's primarily in her base form, she tends to be more of a troll towards her opponents, teleporting around, messing around with them, even having the ability to use transformation magic or illusion magic to mess with her opponents. Another ability she knows how to use is Exterminate Ray, which is literally just a magical beam that she shoots at her opponents, which could pierce any object, especially since she is a lot stronger than most people. And due to this troll-like nature, she is relatively cunning and likes to mess with her opponents, giving her an edge in battle. And that's also not taking into account her actual enchanted weapon, which is the Divine Sword Rita, which has basically the same ability as the Divine Axe Rita that Escanor wielded, as this was made from a fragment of Escanor's axe, which is the ability to store up the power of the sun. Basically, store up Gawain's sun power. Her sun power is called Dawn and not Sunshine, which is most likely a variation of Sunshine for her. And when she's in her buff form, her sword will end up absorbing some of that energy and store it. Now, we've only seen her use her sword once, and she hasn't used this capability of her sword just yet, so perhaps she doesn't know how to fully use the full power of her actual sword to make her stronger. But doing this, if she has her sword with her, when she's in her buff form, she can access the reservoir of power that is saved up in it in order to revitalize or reinforce her own magical power to stay in her buff form even longer. Similar to how Escanor used Divine Axe Rita to stay in his Sunshine form, even though it's slightly weaker, a lot longer even when the sun was being blocked out, which would have certainly made him back into his weakened state. And with her base stats as a buff form, and her tankiness and her relatively physical strength, the power of her sun attacks, and all of her hacks, she does deserve a spot at number 2, I know what you're saying. Why does this make her number 2, as with what you mentioned with Tristan, by process of elimination, he should be a bit stronger than Gawain, with his own hacks and own powerful abilities. And to that you are right. However, there is a line in the Demon Realm arc by Gawain that many people have stated to possibly be fact, and the fact that when Tristan says that when he goes Demon Mark form, the only other people aside from his dad is Lancelot that can actually stop him. And when he asks Gawain if she has enough power to handle him if he goes out of control, she states, if I was at full power, then I most likely would be able to handle you. And that's basically the dialogue that I stated at the beginning when I was ranking Tristan and Gawain, being like, it's more like semantics. It's more guessing at this point because we don't see any real feat to showcase if Gawain is indeed on par, if not just slightly stronger than the unmarked Tristan, which is Tristan's strongest state. And it's more going off of what she says. Now, obviously, in this instance, in the original arc, Gawain isn't as overly boastful and just arrogant as she normally is. She is arrogant, but she's a lot more honest with herself based off of what she's gone through in this arc. So perhaps she's telling the truth, or she's doing a bit more boasting to give Tristan a bit more confidence that in another time she would most likely be able to handle him, and that he can be able to trust her to keep him in check if he were to ever to lose control. Which, based off of Gawain's own instance in that arc, growing to trust her newfound friends and her new place to belong, makes sense. But if we go by a power scaling perspective, like there are some people doing, it does kind of make sense, but at the same time, I would most likely try and keep Tristan at number 2 over Gawain due to the fact that we don't really see it. However, I am giving Gawain the slight edge in this due to her own personal hacks, and her trolling nature gives her at the very least a slight edge over Tristan. There's also the fact that she can have access and even create spell beads and storage objects, which could allow for a bunch of different variations. If she has a healing spell bead, she can heal herself just like how Tristan can heal himself. She also has teleportation beam. There's a lot that Gawain can potentially do with sheer hacks alone, which is why I'm, aside from just that one statement she gave in the Demon Realm arc, I'm putting her slightly above Tristan in this one instance, but you could really just throw them in either or. If you ask me, if it wasn't for that line of dialogue and some of the extra stuff in the volume 14, extra pages and basic information, I would put Tristan at number 2 on this list. But for now, ranking Gawain above Tristan, at least very slightly. This could obviously change with newer information, but for now, it's just a slight variation in having Gawain top Tristan. And finally, to no one's surprise, number 1 ranked in the Four Knights of the Apocalypse, the strongest member of the group, is obviously Lancelot. What can we say about Lancelot? He's got transformation magic. He is a tactical genius. He is skilled in hand-to-hand combat. He is skilled with an archery bow. He can use a sword. He is skilled with knives. He has ranged attacks. He has pure physical strength. And when he unleashes his true magical power, he can actually absorb magical attacks seemingly and put it into himself. He was able to outspeed and outpower a potentially Archangel level threat in Nanashi, who is a powerful angel, and many people speculate is an Archangel and has had thousands of years of battle experience and has fought in countless wars and battles, more so than Lancelot. Lancelot can also read people's minds and hearts, allowing him to see what they're going to do next, giving him the perfect opportunity to perfectly counter his opponents. And like I stated, he has transformation magic, which allows him a chance of stealth, making him the perfect spy, as well as being able to go into specific areas and hide from opponents in order to get a better vantage point, whether it be to snipe with his arrows, or to just use his trademark magical attack, which is the only magical attack he's ever used in the series up until this point, Shining Road, which is a powerful homing attack with just sheer magical power. The only limitation to that is that in order to keep it relatively straight and in form, Lancelot needs a weapon, whether it be a knife or a sword. But the trade-off is that any object that he uses that can't handle his magical power will instantly shatter. Obviously, right now he has a brand new sword that he gained after defeating Nanashi, which luckily for him was actually created by Dubs and is capable of withstanding his immense magical power, thus making it the perfect weapon for him at the moment. And to really scale Lancelot up higher is that he has been compared to the 7 deadly sins in terms of strength, whether it be in the Tristan arc when he took out high level chaos beasts and stated that only those on the level 7 deadly sins can take him on, when he ended up fighting Arthur one-on-one, knocking him down to the ground, dodging a variety of his attacks, and even causing him to bleed without him noticing, and even making Arthur shudder when he unleashed his magical power for the first time. There's also the fact that even Arthur told Nanashi that he holds Lancelot in high regard as someone on the level of not greater than all the seasoned fighters he's faced up until this point, which may or may not include the sins themselves, which is crazy to think about, as they are still the strongest characters in the verse that even Arthur chooses not to mess with unless he absolutely has to, and even warns his own men not to face the sins. Now, despite Lancelot being number 1, we still know the least about his full-on magical capabilities and combat strength, as he has not even gone all out yet. Tristan, Percival, Gawain, we've seen them go all out and utilize everything that they have in their toolkits at the moment. But Lancelot is still the big question mark, and the only reason he's up this high is that it's confirmed in story that he is the strongest member of this group, and he has feats to showcase it. He took out the Dark Talismans with relative ease. Without trying, he held off Jericho. He also was able to take out someone who the fanbase has essentially believed to be a Archangel level threat, and even managed to hold his own and even cause the big bad of the series to bleed. Plus, being compared to the 7 deadly sins, it's instantly going to be like, yeah, he's the strongest member of this group. Now, obviously, by the end of the series, this ranking can potentially end up changing. They could all be on equal playing fields, and just hacks will determine their placements, or just Percival as the MC will at the end of the series be number 1 above everybody else. But that's really all future speculations. At the moment, this is the list and rankings for the Fortress of the Apocalypse in terms of their strength. Percival, Tristan, Gawain, then Lancelot. And like I stated earlier, the Tristan and Gawain thing can be flipped either way. I only put Gawain above there based off of her own statements and her own hacks, which is just slightly above Tristan. It could go either way with this rankings, but the weakest and the strongest were set in stone from the very beginning. It was just those two that could go either way. But that's basically it for this list. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know your personal rankings in the comment section down below. Do you agree with my placements? Do you think I made any mistakes or left anything out? Tell me in the comment section down below. And if there's any other Fortnite or 7 deadly sins related videos you'd like me to do, like rankings or explaining certain topics of the series. And also let me know your favorite night of the apocalypse in the comment section down below, as well as other topics you'd like me to cover. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe, hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Helps and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and want me to keep it going. And with all that said and done, I hope you all have an awesome day.